Hey y'all, Zach McDonald, your real estate agent with Real Property Associates, and this is my Seattle real estate market update for February 2025. Well, we've had an interesting last week here in Seattle. Snow off and on, meaning it snowed, it melted, it snowed, it melted, it snowed, it's still melting. But it's been super cold here, and for at least for our Seattle standards. And something that I've seen is that we're still seeing quite a bit of listings coming off the market, looking at some of the Market Watch stats that we normally see, but fewer listings coming on the past week, which would be expected. I have a listing that was supposed to come on this week. We're actually bumping it out a week because of the snow and the weather. And I think there are some other people in that same boat. But as we're looking at the stats here, we're starting to see more houses coming on the market, right? We're starting to see more sales happening. The market is heating up, and that's pretty typical, even though February is typically one of the colder months here in Seattle. We're starting to see the housing market start picking up, and I expect that will continue for the next few months here. And if last year or even the year before is any indicator, we're going to see more activity earlier in the spring. And I bet that unless interest rates come down, the late spring and summer is going to be a little bit slower, like it's been the past few years, at least as far as the activity on listings and the market pressure, because there will be enough houses on the market for all the buyers. And that's been the trend the past few years. There's been enough houses for all the buyers, and there have been enough buyers for the houses, right? And in both cases, even with the higher interest rates. So we haven't seen massive price corrections, but we also haven't seen as much year over year growth as we have previously. We're kind of approaching where we were before, is where we've been targeting towards these past couple years here in the Seattle market. So before we get too far, let's talk about what's going on with mortgage rates. So today on Mortgage News Daily's website, we're right around 7.05%, slightly up from yesterday. And really, we've been hovering in the same place for a few months. And at this point, there's not a lot of hope or expectation that will change too much. I think the market's still kind of paying attention to what's happening here over these past few weeks since we have a new president in place. And at this point, the Fed's signaling, hey, we're probably not going to be doing too much with these rates right now. We're going to be leaving them where they're at. We're trying to figure out what's going on with inflation as well, with some of the new changes. And so I think mortgage rates are probably going to stay in that same place where they're at right now. And so I think we can expect status quo for a little while here in the mortgage market, which I think does have a big impact on the housing market, especially in some of these higher price areas like Seattle. And that's not to say that there aren't people buying and selling. As we've already mentioned, there are plenty of people buying and selling, but it's not going to bring a flood of people because the affordability is not changing dramatically here, with interest rates remaining in the upper sixes, low sevens, depending on your situation. Prices here in Seattle specifically about the same as last year's median sales price. We're 0.5% above last year's median sales price at the end of January, $831,350. Bellevue, $2,226,500. This is actually down 1.7%. But right around where things were last year, even with the ups and downs, there were points where you paid a little bit more last year to buy in Seattle or Bellevue, and the market's been trending down. Now, historically speaking, the December, January is kind of the bottom of seasonal cycles. Then we start to see housing prices coming up. And again, I expect that this year will be pretty similar to last as far as those cycles and the amount of inventory that we saw. Something that I've noticed is that the days on market has been trending a little bit higher this year than last year. So in Seattle, 35 days on market versus 24 at the same time last year. Bellevue, though, interestingly, 7 versus 29, right? So Bellevue's market is quite a bit different than Seattle's market. Just even looking at price, you can see that. The average days on market here, 50 days on market for Seattle, 36 in Bellevue. And the trend has been up in Seattle from 38 to 50, but down from 53 to 36 on the average, right? So Bellevue's trending down in the time to sell, Seattle a little bit more. And as we're looking at percentage of list price received, if we're looking at asking price, right? Are we going to be paying asking price? Are we going to be paying more? That's a pretty common question, right? Bellevue's got 2.7% above asking price on average. Seattle, 99.2% of the asking price. So right around asking price. And this is to say that we're looking at most likely seeing houses going for right around the asking price in both cases. And the median shows that too. So median percent of list price, 99.9 in Seattle and 100% of Bellevue. So there's definitely some houses selling a little over and some houses selling below the asking price. Bellevue having a little bit more of the competition for listings. And a lot of that's because there aren't as many houses for sale in Bellevue as there are in Seattle. Now, new listings also up. So something that we talk about is there's a seasonality of listing inventory, right? Houses coming on the market, coming off the market, but it's good to look at year over year. So in Seattle, 37% more new listings this year than last year. And last year was about the same as the previous year in 2023. This year, quite a bit more new listing activity in January. Bellevue saw an uptick as well, not as much as if you look back at 2023, it's actually fairly similar, but compared to last year, 49.1%. It's almost 50% more new listings for Bellevue year over year. And the closed sales, about the same in Seattle, 0.8% down year over year. Bellevue, 12.5% up. So right, we're seeing more houses coming on the market, about the same or a little bit less selling in Seattle's case. And so we're seeing an uptick in the inventory numbers. So we are seeing more houses for sale in Seattle, 44.9% more than last January, right? It's not by any means a high inventory environment, but more than last year. In Bellevue, 7% more homes for sale. And that does affect the supply. So 1.5 months of supply in Seattle, 0.8 months of supply in Bellevue. And what that means for buyers, I think, is that you're seeing more opportunities earlier in the year than waiting until spring. But it doesn't feel like that. It still feels like houses are selling fairly quickly. You want to go see the new ones right away. There are quite a few houses that have been holding over from last year still. So November, December houses, and some of those have been on the market and are still on the market. So I think they're still skewing our data a little bit. We need some of those houses to sell. So we're not having those ones weighing down the average and the median. But at this point, we're seeing that things are selling quicker. I've had a few different situations this last week where there were multiple offers or houses selling really quickly on the buyer side. And that is something that will continue here for a few months, I would guess, unless we have a big uptick in the listing numbers, which we're not seeing that dramatically affected at this point. So for now, I expect that we're going to see some of those normal seasonal trends here in Seattle, Bellevue, and really across King and Snohomish County. I think we're going to see a somewhat competitive spring housing market, and that's already started, really. And we're going to start to see that taper off. My guess would be sometime around late May, early June. And it might even taper off earlier this year because of the amount of new listings coming on the market. So if interest rates stay where they're at and we continue to see more new listings earlier in the year, it's possible that the hottest time of the year might actually be on the front side of 2025. So meaning March, April. Sometimes May is the hottest month. I would guess in this year, it's just my guess, that we're going to see that earlier. So listings in March and February are going to have a better chance of selling with the multiple offers than maybe those in May or June. And a lot of that just comes down to the amount of houses on the market, right? There are always houses that sell above asking price because they're amazing and everybody wants to buy them. But the general house, I think will have a better chance of getting multiple offers and seeing the price going up, better terms, all the things that a seller wants to see earlier in the year. And I think for a buyer, if you're able to be patient, right? Sometimes it feels like, man, I'm starting my house search. I got to do this right now. But if you're able to be patient and wait out some of those more intense competitive situations, you'll be better off in the long run and you'll get what you really want versus trying to force yourself into making a purchase that maybe isn't as ideal with some of that extra competition. So a few thoughts here as we wrap up the market update. But overall, we're seeing a pretty normal start to the year here in Seattle. I think the interest rates are something that we're going to continue to talk about for the year. I think if you want to follow along on a weekly basis, I talk about the King and Snohomish County market more generally, about the amount of the inventory coming on, coming off, and have a better pulse on the market on those ones on a weekly basis. So if you want more current, as of right now, data, those would be great updates to take a watch or listen to here on a weekly basis. And of course, we'll be back with this next update next month. If there are questions that you have about what's going on in the market or your situation here, I'd love to be a resource for you.